Time to pivot over to talk with the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. And we welcome Chris Meyer back into the studio. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm great. Good morning, Brian.
Why, when I teased the forecast and said, will we get any relief from the heat, you just like side-eyed me, shaking your head no?
I mean, it's the time of the year. We should just all buckle down, drink your water as much as you can. It's going to be hot out there.
Yes, it is. All right. We've got numbers. We've got data. We've got a report on early childhood education. And it looks like we need to do things better on a local. I tell you what, before I get into what we need to do, tell me all about the report, how it got started, and what we learned.
Yeah. So, about 8 months ago, we put out one of our opportunity data project releases where we're studying really the drivers of opportunity in our community, trying to really help leaders and community members focus on if we're going to change our circumstances, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
There's no better return on investment than getting early childhood education right. And while Baton Rouge has made some really significant strides in this area, there's some glaring challenges in the way we organize, the way we fund, and the way we provide access to early childhood. We were finding that about half of our kids who come from disadvantaged backgrounds were not showing up ready for kindergarten. Nearly 40% of kids who were attending Head Start centers, which is some of the most well-resourced early childhood spots in our community. Unfortunately, 40% of those kids were showing up and literally scoring a 0 on their kindergarten readiness assessment, meaning they didn't understand basic letter sounds. And you really wonder what they had been doing at the cost of nearly $13,000, $14,000 a child. So all of this is things that, maybe it was new to me and new to members of our sort of task force, but under the leadership of folks from the council, the school superintendent, the mayor, providers, families, others, we all got together and said, well, what do we need to make of this? Because when you look at the way we fund early childhood education in this community, it is siloed, it is bifurcated. It's very confusing for families. It's very confusing for providers about how do we connect the dots and prepare all of our kids for a great start at education and life.
Okay, I'm glad you started with the accountability part of this. I'm glad you mentioned that in that ramp up here. $13,000 to $14,000 per child. This is what gets people jaded.
Yeah,
this is what gets people turned off and dialed out. And when you see the results, the ability to see the results and react to the results, rather than just doing the same thing over again, throwing good money after bad. So, what do we do with it, and how do we go about providing greater access to better early childhood education?
Yeah, and look, I'm not going to try to send you off into a rant this morning, but in Head Start in particular,
you inevitably do every time you're on. It's going to happen,
but we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. I mean, the worst part of Head Start is we were only serving about half the kids that we were eligible to receive funding for. So we were turning back enough funding for about 600 kids, just telling the federal government, no, thank you. Send that money to Mississippi or Texas or Arkansas. We don't want it here in Baton Rouge. So we weren't even able to organize, even though we were getting bad outcomes, we weren't even to organize ourselves well enough to receive all the money that we qualified for as a city. So the dysfunction on top of dysfunction was clear. And that's not to blame anyone, but it really is to say enough was enough. This task force gave us kind of the moment to say, we know we have to do things differently. How do we do that? And fortunately, there are lots of communities around the country that have figured out ways to unify and better coordinate their funding streams, their providers, and most importantly, give families real choice and access that leads to better outcomes.
Turning back funding versus taking the funding and wasting it. I mean, that's kind of
6 and 1/2.
I know mean, it's like every time I buy lettuce, thinking I'm going to eat a salad, and then I throw away bad lettuce. What's the difference?
Well, but the problem here is if you were a family in Head Start, you only had access to the iceberg.
Right.
You had no.
But even
sort of
the
salad
iceberg
bar
went bad in the fridge.
All right, but here's what we can do about it, and this is where I think there is such strong momentum in our community that everyone needs to pay attention to. Our school superintendent, our new mayor, our council, our school board, they are all united in not running things the way they've always been run, which were very siloed. So if you qualified for Head Start, you could only enter through the Head Start door and only have access to one of 10 centers. That's not going to be the case anymore. The mayor and the superintendent last week, along with us, came together and said, we're going to together create a new coordinating entity. And we're going to do it with faith leaders, providers, families, nonprofits. We're all going to get together and we're going to form a new organization whose only job is to coordinate all the resources available for early learning and make sure they're only going to centers that are quality, make sure families have real access, that they're not siloed into a slot just because of the type of funding they get. So it really empowers both our provider community, our faith community, but most importantly, our parents, our families, that now are going to have real choice at better options for serving and developing their kids.
Okay, now this is the part where it gets fun, but it's also the part where it gets, the real questions start to come up. Like, how do you get all these people rowing in the same direction?
Well, the good news is in Baton Rouge, the two main decision makers about how public funds are allocated to early learning, it's the mayor's office and it's the school superintendent.
Okay.
So when you have the two of them stacking hands and saying, we're going to do it differently, that is amazing as public leaders, a very selfless act to say, we know it hasn't been working as well as it should. Again, we've made a lot of progress, but we're not taking advantage of what a lot of other communities have figured out. Communities like Denver, communities like Tulsa, even communities like New Orleans. But I know we don't always like to point to our sister city down the river. So let's go look elsewhere and figure out where they've really created universal access for families. And more importantly, more kids showing up day one ready for kindergarten, which, as we've talked about in our studies around how kids either stay on track or they get off track, and we know what happens when they get off track. These types of investments early will make a monumental difference down the road.
I mean, look, talking about pointing down the river to New Orleans, they can't accurately count how many people break out of jail. So I'm just going to leave that one out there.
Had we made those investments earlier.
All right.
Oh, goodness.
How much does it help that our mayor president has an educational background, that he was a coach and a teacher? I mean,
look, he visited a Head Start classroom or a Head Start center week one, and he called me after and he said, we have to change this. So he was a part of his team. Technically we'd started this task force under the previous administration. To his credit, his team jumped right in. They studied the issues. They went, put their own eyes on it, and coach himself said, this has to change. How do we do it better? So he knows the best investment we can make as a community is in developing our young children. You mentioned at the top of the show, unfortunately, Dr. Tate's going to be leaving LSU. He's talked for a long time about building a brain regime in a community. And really, there's no better point of what a community is than building up the next generation. And if we know we're not spending our dollars as well as we can to bring all of our kids to day one readiness in kindergarten, again, only half our kids show up ready.
Right.
That's atrocious.
It is.
We can fix that.
Yeah.
It is fixable. Kids are sponges. They are eager and ready to learn. We just have to support them. And frankly, we can get more providers, more faith-based organizations, small businesses that want to be in early learning and development to frankly come forward and be part of the solution.
Chris Meyer from the Baton Rouge Area Foundation is in with us talking about a pivot in early childhood education. All right. The next question is going to be about funding. Do the same Head Start dollars move over, or are we going to have to find new revenue streams?
Yeah. So, the good news is we basically have enough money in the system now to make sure that every 4-year-old that needs access to early learning slots could be funded. Dropping down to 3-year-olds and younger, that's where our community is going to have to figure this out. But the first place is, if you're not spending your current dollars well enough, we shouldn't be asking for more, reallocating more to something that's not working for everyone. So the first part is, let's coordinate, let's braid the funds together, which you're allowed to do. We've taken a lot of steps. Again, communities like in Jefferson Parish, in New Orleans, in Shreveport, they're figuring this out. We're the capital city. We can do this. So that's step one. Long term, I do think there is a big question for our community is, where's the best investment we can make as the public in building a future for our city?
Right.
And I personally think that investment is best placed when we put it in the development of the brains and the talent and the people of our community. And that starts with our youngest learners.
How do we get buy-in on, okay.
So yeah, funding is going to be a big question we talk about over time.
Because you have to have buy-in in the value. You have to have buy-in.
You got to show that it works. And we know it works.
If what we've been doing hasn't been working,
right,
then convincing that we've found the right answer this time around, that's the tough sell. when you have with early childhood education, you get out what you put in, and those that want to invest in their children have. I mean, Head Start is one thing, but I'll speak for it all day long.
Yep.
Knowing the difference between sending my kid from daycare over to school at 3 versus daycare over to school at 4.
Yeah.
The difference is all the difference.
Yeah. And the good news is, I mean, part of our opportunity data project is we now have access to the data where we can follow kids from where they went to early childhood learning and development, wherever that was. We can see how they scored in their kindergarten readiness assessment. We can see how they score in first grade. We can see how they score second, third. So you can see longitudinally how kids are progressing. And it is true. Kids that go to higher rated early learning centers end up starting off better. They stay on track despite some of the other sort of pools and obstacles that might be in their way. So we know it's possible for any kid from any background to achieve educationally. But the difference maker is, are they in a quality center? And right now, we don't allow access to all our quality centers. We don't incentivize our quality centers to grow because we keep siloing funds.
Timelines. When can we see this start to get rolling?
Yeah, so look, we think you're going to see an announcement later this summer on the creation of this new coordinating entity. We have some pilots underway where we're going to begin giving some families access to more diverse learning spots. So look for an announcement later this summer. There's a founding group of community leaders that are going to be getting together to kind of serve as a founding board and to help organize this effort. So again, this is going to be a community-wide effort to improve and invest in our early learning options, something that we can take charge of, we can fix in a short period of time in our community.
Last one before we get you out of here. And the how does this tie back into, we've had the conversation before about workforce development.
Yeah.
And how I don't like this angle because it diminishes the role of the educational part of this. But putting kids in school at 3 frees parents up to go work.
Oh, it goes hand in hand. I mean,
Yes.
This is so fundamentally, when we talk about it, a whole of community effort, our business community is going to be pivotal. This works hand in hand. And if we can make it a high quality early learning opportunity, we are just multiplying the impact over and over. And again, other communities have figured this out and have gotten 70, 80% of their kids on track from day one. That is an easy goal for us to hit as a community.
Which I love. I'm always hesitant to bring it up because we talk all this about the developmental, the development of the child and how it's pivotal at this time, and the education is real. But when you talk about it from a workforce standpoint, you run the risk of diminishing the value of the education to make it sound like babysitting.
It's both and look,
is.
we're gonna call on our business community who continually steps up for Baton Rouge to be part of the solution. So place sort of learning centers, others, we're gonna really expand these opportunities.
He's Chris Meyer from the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. I always appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brian.